Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. My deepest apologies for the delay. There was just some incredible technical problem here. Just had to restart my computer, and all is well, inshallah. So, welcome to Blogging Theology Academy, and you are all most welcome. Just double checking my settings there. And we're delighted you've come to the live Q&A session where myself and Sheikh Hassan Spiker will be taking your questions about the advanced diploma in the Western tradition and Islamic philosophy and theology. At Blogging Theology Academy, we aspire to provide amongst the most rigorous philosophical and theological educations available anywhere in the world today. Our advanced diploma in the Western tradition and Islamic philosophy and theology equips students with a deep and penetrating knowledge of our contemporary context as Muslims in a modern world, hitherto dominated by Western philosophical, education, political, and social frameworks. Increasingly, much evidence suggests that we are moving decisively into a post-liberal, post-unipolar world, and as such, it is especially imperative for Muslims to become far more than passive consumers of thought and culture. At BT Academy, we aspire to train the next generation of intellectual shapers of this emerging new world. And to this end, we have carefully crafted our advanced diploma to comprise two courses, which taken together qualify students to comprehend the Western intellectual context with confidence, while simultaneously understanding the Islamic alternative, which, though enjoying much overlap with the former, transcends many of the very tensions and contradictions which led to the present religious and intellectual impasse that besets us in the West, an impasse perhaps now best exemplified by the so-called culture wars. Now, there is the opportunity to study with guest lecturers who are among the greatest experts in their fields today, and we can go into that in more detail, while also receiving an education tailor-made to your specific aptitudes and needs, the centerpiece of which is the one-on-one tutorial with our lead instructors, myself and Hassan Spiker. So we offer two complementary cutting-edge courses. The first one, the Bible and Early Christianity, the Western Critical Method and Islam, of which I'm the instructor, illuminates our contemporary religious context as Muslims by shedding detailed and critical light on the past, particularly the struggle to define early Christianity that held such enormous consequences for the future of Christian and finally post-Christian Europe. Most significantly, we will explore how modern scholarship's analysis of biblical and other evidence for the nature of original Christianity reveals an astonishing correspondence with the Islamic revealed account of those origins. The other course I mentioned is by Sheikh Hassan Spiker, who will teach a course entitled Metaphysics and Logic in the Islamic and Western Traditions. And this will aims to equip students with advanced logical and philosophical tools from both of these very broad traditions, aiming not merely to provide general culture in the comparative history of philosophy, but rather to train practitioners who have mastered the fundamental principles of philosophy and who will, by the time they graduate, be empowered to pursue further mastery and become the advanced and original, authentically Islamic analysts and thinkers our Ummah so urgently needs. So that is my brief introduction. There's obviously a website which I do refer everyone to, the Blogging Theology Academy.com, where you can find out more about the faculty that we mentioned, about admissions. You can read the prospectus. There's a very detailed FAQ, frequently asked questions section, and an about section as well. So hopefully that will answer many of your questions. But there we go for now. And Hassan, good morning to you, or good afternoon rather. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Paul. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we're obviously today addressing live Q&As from people. So did you have anything you wanted to add at this stage before we go through the questions?
I think you pretty much said everything. I think the key point I'd like to emphasize again is just this idea that we, in the times that we're living, need something of a new form of education, a new pattern, a new kind of framework. And the world is just changing so fast, and it's very difficult. I mean, it's a kind of perennial problem of Muslim educators, is what exactly is the right approach and what exactly will address the needs of the time. And I think that the kind of seminary side of things, which is what they call fard ayn, that which is the obligatory religious knowledge that every Muslim, basic knowledge every Muslim needs to know, is actually very, very well catered for. Traditional Islamic sciences, mashallah, there's an academy popping up everywhere, and some of them are very, very high quality. I think what the age that we're moving into now shows us is that the West, in a kind of pretty universally acknowledged decline now, even by Westerners themselves, even by the establishment, is at a kind of intellectual impasse. And there's a shift taking place where decisively beyond the aftermath of colonialism, where there was a lot of confusion. And I think Muslims are now in a much, much stronger position. So I think the really key thing is that we don't continue to find ourselves in a situation where we are kind of passive consumers of someone else's culture, someone else's philosophy, someone else's thought. And that's really the idea behind this diploma. Is it's supposed to provide a real sense of empowerment, a reality of empowerment, not just a sense of it. With respect to our situatedness as Muslims living in the West, if we live in the West, I mean, I don't actually, but living in a world that continues to be Western dominated, even if that grip is obviously slipping, but still, in media and education and this notion of some sort of, somehow neutral, universal civilization of modernity, which is really not at all neutral and is very much thoroughly idiosyncratically Western. So, excuse me, that's the basic idea between having these two courses. One is to help you understand that Europe was previously, the West was previously a profoundly religious culture for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you might even call it kind of fanatically religious. In fact, it was. But at the end, certain extreme changes took place in Europe, which led to the emergence of modernity. Now, we're not perennialists or traditionalists, and we're not anti-modernity. There are good gifts from God, just as everything is a gift from God, which he's brought to us, given to us through modernity. But nonetheless, there's obviously a lot of evil, a lot of human depravity, and many, many problems which have emerged because of the aspect of modernity which involves a rejection of tradition, a rejection of religion, a rejection of God, a rejection of authority. And as such, there are certain factors which very, very much uniquely, in the European case, led to this phenomenal change. So I'm not going to go into any more detail on that, except to say that Western civilization tends to be characterized by these fundamental splits down the middle of reality, which you just have to kind of live with. And Islam is characterized by wholeness and unification. So, the first one in Christianity was the split between the law and the spirit. The so-called antinomianism, which you find with Paul, who they call Saint Paul, obviously not Paul.
Not me. No, I'm not guilty of that. No.
He's not an antonym. So the split between law and spirit, the split between faith and reason, which becomes very, very pronounced with Luther, who says lots of very, very rude things about reason and wants to banish theology, the exercise of logic and Aristotle, anything to do with philosophy, from theology altogether. And that takes on a life of its own. It becomes very, very significant for a kind of reconfiguration of the notion of faith and the notion of reason that you find later on in the West, with reason becoming purely instrumental scientific reason and faith becoming something like blind faith. And again, it's very important for Muslims to be able to discern these nuances, because that's not our conception of faith at all, not our conception of reason at all. Then there's the whole render unto Caesar such things as Caesar's. This is the split between church and state, which is very much alien to Islam as well, has very profound consequences, and ultimately giving rise to the birth of secularism. Excuse me. And then finally, the split between will and desire, because there's this notion of original sin that comes from Augustine, which says basically, look, you can't be good. It's impossible. Forget it. You need Christ to die on the cross in order to pay for your sins, because you can't help being sinful, because your will has been tainted by original sin. So understanding these, what we would see as being sorry to use the word, but for somewhat degenerate aspects of the doctrine of tainted Christianity, this forms the background to a philosophy then taking a life of its own in Europe. Anyway, I've already said too much, so let's take questions.
That's fine. Thank you for that. What I'll do then is I'll put the questions up on the screen, more or less as they appear in order. So here is the first one that came to mind. Is it possible to make this course to be taught in a physical classroom? Some of us are old-fashioned and prefer to learn in person. Well, yes, I certainly sympathize with that question. The course itself, the two courses we've mentioned, will be online, but there will be an opportunity to study with us in person. We're looking at possible winter and summer retreat programs at venues around the world. We have a particular place in Granada in Spain at the moment where there's an opportunity to study with us and with some special guests. So the answer is yes and no. The course, as I mentioned, is online, but we are looking very much to have kind of a real world presence as well. I agree, it's much to be preferred sometimes, but there's benefit in doing it online as well, of course. Did you want to add anything, Hassan?
Not really on that one. I think you've said it all.
Okay. Just scrolling down. Yes. Okay. This is a good question. What are the entry requirements? So I'll just say something very briefly, and then Hassan can say something as well. There aren't any formal entry requirements in terms of having to have a particular qualification, but we are looking for people who have a very serious commitment to studying philosophy, theology, and the other subjects at an advanced level. So there has to be an aptitude to do this and a commitment to do this, because it will involve a lot of reading and there's some study, of course, and attendance on the course. But we're not looking for formal entry requirements. And there is a way you can apply to the course by going on the website, bloggingtheologyacademy.com. There is an application process, a form that you can complete with some various questions. And that is the way we are encouraging people to discuss that. Did you want to add anything, Hassan, to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, everything you just said. It does say on the website that we're looking for people who preferably have as many qualifications as possible, preferably have a related qualification. That's simply our preference, of course, because the more general culture you have, or specific culture you have about the topics, the more quickly you're going to be able to delve into intricacies. But the reason we don't have any formal entry requirements, as Paul said, is because we admit every applicant via interview. And if you happen to not have formal qualifications, I'm very sympathetic, because I actually didn't have formal qualification for years. And with the emphasis on formal, I was studying with a sheikh, and I took my BA and then MPhil and then started my PhD very, very late. So I know that there are applicants who don't have formal qualifications who should be let into the course if they want to study with us, because they have the aptitude, as Paul said, and they have the passion for the subject.
Yeah, it's very important to have that absolutely that passion and the interest as well. Thank you for that. Someone's asking if we're going to bring in Dr. Ramon Harvey. Inshallah, we'll see. He's a very distinguished scholar at the Cambridge Muslim College. He's a PhD and so on. We'll see about that, inshallah. Just scrolling down. Is this full or part-time? Part-time, really. We certainly expect people to have jobs and other vocational commitments. So we're talking. Hassan will explain in more detail as well. Probably about 4 hours a week in terms of active engagement online, but there will also be it's time to read and to read texts, which is very important in preparation for following the course. Did you want to say anything more about that, Hassan?
Yeah, I would definitely say that it's part-time. I mean, to the extent that the full part-time distinction is very clear and meaningful, of course it is in a way. It's certainly not 9 to 5. As Paul said, it's 4 hours a week in terms of actual live instruction, which is very rigorous and demands a lot of attention, by the way. And this relates to the first question, comment about, it's a shame that this isn't in person. I actually agree with you. I mean, online education is in a certain way a compromise. In other ways, it's a great opportunity because it can bring together, obviously, people, and has so successfully. Remember, this all started really with COVID. People from all across the world. I mean, at the University of Cambridge, I attend the graduate Plotinus, or it's actually Neoplatonism seminar, and it brings together the top scholars of Platonism in the world from everywhere. Whereas before, we just used to have it in one of the rooms in the divinity faculty, and you just had the people who happened to be there. So, what this allows us to do is to bring people from all around the world, great top scholars like Ali Attai and many others. I've got people from Harvard, I've got people from Oxford, I've got people from all over the place, from Cambridge. But what we're trying to do is to mitigate some of the shortcomings of online education through a very clear framework that we're going to be adopting inside class, which actually not only encourages participation, it actually requires participation. And that's something that Paul and I are working on at the moment and finalizing. But it's going to involve things like breakout rooms, live quizzes, things like that. So breakout rooms are where, let's say there's 25 people in the class, you put everyone into several groups, and they go away and have to do a task together, which they actually have to work out together. And then they send the results of that back once they re-enter the room, and then someone has to account for how they got to that conclusion. So it's really being involved in what you're doing. There are also assignments, and then there's also the kind of flagship. I think what really distinguishes Blogging Theology Academy, which is the tutorial, which takes place in each individual class of metaphysics and logic on the one hand, and the critical method on the other. So with Paul individually and with me individually for each course, which is essentially, so this is really not kind of just you passively sitting there absorbing what you happen to get this bit and you don't happen to get that other bit. That's where you'll be set an assignment, which you'll then essentially be grilled on, which is more or less adopting the Oxbridge tutorial model. And it's really a chance for your instructor to assess quite rigorously and quite careful detail where you're at and what you need to do in order to get to where you need to be. And then there'll be a second tutorial at the beginning of the second term, which is where you, having been set a tailor-made assignment, which particularly tries to determine your strengths and weaknesses, and help you to address those in the course of the writing of that assignment, which you'll then be grilled on again for the second. And And so these class participation is going to be a very important part of the grade. The tutorial is going to be a very important part of the grade. This is not a kind of pass-fail thing. You just kind of sit there with your camera off, and there are going to be certain regulations also, again, to avoid this this problem of the kind of passivity often of online education, which is things like everyone's going to have their camera on. They're going to have to actually be there, just like you're not allowed to physically disappear when you're in a classroom. You'll have to actually appear and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And I sort of want to add, in terms of the participation, we have a number of faculty. You can see that on the Blogging and Theology Academy website. People like Dr. Ali Attai and other distinguished scholars, Oxford and Harvard and so on. And not only will they be giving, there's no recorded sessions. This is all live. So not only will you hear these distinguished visiting scholars teach live, but there will be opportunities for questions and answers. So that will be interactive. You're not just passively consuming. We are listening and observing and participating with questions and answers as well. And I think that's really, really cool, actually. Okay, there's another technical question here from the passive warner. Salam, when can we expect the initial interview decision? And that's very topical, I think, isn't it, Hassan, at the moment?
It certainly is. Paul is just in the final stage of reviewing the first wave of applications. I've already suggested my shortlist, and so we're hoping to be able to send that out this evening. That's the first wave. I hope that many of you who are watching today will be moved to apply, and then you will be certainly informed of a general window for when you'll be told about the decision. It's not something we've decided yet for the second wave, but do apply, and we'll make sure to keep you in the loop about when that will happen. It'll probably be within a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah, go onto the website and you'll see that there's an application page there. Just click on the relevant section. Someone's asking something we covered already. Is this suited to someone with a full-time job? The short answer is yes. We're talking about 4 hours a week. So in terms of online commitment plus study time. So the answer is certainly yes to that question, I think. Next question is, will the lecture be on demand? I'm not sure what that means, but I think that there will be set times when the lectures will occur. They're not recorded, but we will attempt to time them so that most people in the world can participate comfortably, mindful of the time differences. Did you want to add anything to that, Hassan?
Yeah, we have a kind of limited capacity for students because we want to be able to give everyone proper attention. So the likelihood, depending on the number of students, is that we will have 3 different groups, but it could be 2 groups. But one of the purposes of that, apart from keeping the class size small, is to be able to spread out to be able to have a timing which suits everyone, because I know people are joining from all over the world. So basically a morning, afternoon and evening one. It's possible that it hasn't been finalized completely, the schedule yet, but it will either be on 1 or 2 days. And we'll be in close contact with each student to ensure they're put into the right group, a group that they're happy with in terms of the timing and so on. And there'll be a lot of flexibility there, so it's not to worry about that. But yes, I mean, I was going to say the short answer it is compatible with full-time work. We're actually on a different question now. Yeah, will the lecture be on demand? Yeah, I'm not sure that I understand what that means, but it won't be recorded, no. And we will try to cater for people's different needs in terms of timing.
We'll do the best to do that. This is a question. Will a graduate from a traditional Islamic seminary benefit from this diploma? If so, how? Well, it's speaking for the course I'm doing on the history of early Christianity, the historical Jesus, the Gospels, and the rise of the Christian West, Christendom. That's obviously not covered by a traditional Islamic seminary, But in terms of metaphysics and logic, which is Hassan's speciality, how would you respond to that query?
Well, I'll give you an example. We are studying both traditional logic and modern logic in the course. Now, in traditional Islamic seminaries, I'd like to say they've all got traditional logic down really well, but you know as well as I do that that's not actually true today, unfortunately, depending on where you've gone. But I would say in a large majority, there's not a sufficiently rigorous study of logic anyway. That didn't used to be the case, whether we were talking about Firangi Mahal and the Khairavadi school in Mughal India or the Ottoman world. You would have studied, any student would have studied logic by today's standards, to absolute mastery, extraordinary level. But so that's not actually the case. So, myself coming from, as it were, traditional seminary background, although it was actually a traditional halaqah, it wasn't an institution, but in that way it was, forgive me for saying, but probably more rigorous than most seminaries. I know the challenges that the modern, or the Islamic seminary in the modern world faces. One of the main ones is not having sufficient philosophical material. And again, that didn't used to be the case. So sorry to complicate the answer with that. But I think that is an issue in the first place, is that generally those who have graduated from traditional seminaries, they don't have an adequate grasp of philosophical thought, of nazar, what you call nazar, actually, totally devoid of taqlid or blind following, just pure looking at the evidence and working it out, and coming to conclusions independently. There's not usually enough of that. Some of them do manage to do a brilliant job on that. But let's just assume that they all do a brilliant job. Maybe your seminary did. Maybe you're very happy with it. And I'm delighted to hear that, if that's the case. Would this course be beneficial to you? Absolutely. The whole point is, how do you relate your knowledge of your own Islamic intellectual tradition to the world that we're actually living in today, dominated by so-called universal education, secular education, dominated by scientism, and now in this very, very strange state, because the West is kind of collapsing morally and intellectually, and you have these culture wars and so on, and there are a lot of new, exciting opportunities in the rest of the world, which is, which challenging Western hegemony, not only politically but also intellectually. So this idea is the idea of this course, of the metaphysics and logic course, is to really empower students to understand the world that we're in, not just through general thaqafa. I watched a documentary and read a kind of popular book. No, as a kind of practitioner, you really understand. You possess a kind of mastery. How do we do that? One of the ways that we do it is through close reading of the Western canon. So, we'll be reading Aristotle's Posterior Analytics, a close reading. Plato's Republic, a close reading. Plotinus, close reading. And then, it's also very historically sensitive. So going through all of these stages into the Middle Ages, Aquinas, then Occam, things start to change. Luther, that's not really my job doing Luther, but then into Descartes, the philosophical revolution, Locke, his controversy with Leibniz. And then, we're going to show you, how do you get to where we are now? How did that happen? This very strange place that we are now. And that's greatly empowering. You will come out of the course knowing much more than some of you are Westerners, but much more than the average Westerner, as it were. I mean, as meaningless as that is, forgive me, about their own civilization. When that is put together with your Islamic knowledge, I've experienced this for myself, is going to make so much more sense. And it's going to be so much more clearly applicable to the world that you're living in. The danger with Islamic seminaries today, if you don't have the type of education that we're offering, is that you kind of enter an intellectual ghetto. You're just kind of catering to your own flock. You're just preaching to the crowd. You can't relate. This is even a dawah issue because you don't know how to frame what is ultimately the question of the truth of Islam to your interlocutor. And so it can tend to go straight over their head. So I think it's a greatly empowering course, definitely for someone who has a traditional seminary background, inshallah ta'ala.
Great. Thank you so much, Hassan. Quick question. Will the lectures be accessible on YouTube? It's not the intention to record them. I say they're live. We're trying to get away from this thing of just recycling old material. No, everything is live. The Q&A, the talks, the lectures, everything. That's the intention there. Just scrolling down. This is a good question. You offer 2 courses. Do you have to study both at the same time, or can you choose one or the other? No, the intention is that they are to be studied together. If you like, 2 sides or 2 parts of one course, really. They're complementary and they're intended to work side by side, really. That would be the answer to that, I think. Next question, will there be interviews? Absolutely. When you apply, you'll get a response from us and an application form, of course. And yes, there will be interviews conducted by Hassan and myself, inshallah. Oh, yes, this is a good question. What is the purpose of studying Christianity in depth? Well, that's a very good question. I think it's intrinsically interesting, but Christianity, the Bible, this whole incredible religion has been absolutely foundational to the Western world. And even though many areas of the West are becoming heavily secularized, or have been, so France since 1789, of course, religion still plays a very important role. Look at the United States, the role of conservative Christianity there, Christian Zionism, for example, on foreign policy, is no longer just an obscure academic. It's not an obscure academic point at all. And I think it's important Muslims to understand the West and therefore the world we live in, is to get to grips with the historical origins of Christianity, whether it be the Bible, early Christianity, and look at the various approaches to studying this, whether it be the historical critical method, of Muslim approaches to studying early Christianity, look at the whole problems of Paul and the relationship to Jesus and early Christianity, but then going on to looking to the later period, the development of Christendom, the Council of Nicaea, Augustine, medieval Christianity, the Reformation, the birth of biblical criticism and Christian dominations, also looking at Muslim-Christian relations, because in many ways this whole subject has defined the modern world we live in. So for me, I find this subject intrinsically interesting, but it also has enduring, very real world political and religious import now. Look at what's going on in Gaza is certainly related, and the occupied territories in Palestine is certainly related to how people read the Bible, how they interpret it, and how do Muslims see Christianity? How do we understand it? And what's the relationship between an Islamic understanding of Jesus, Islamic understanding of Christianity, and the historical critical method? These are these quite sophisticated scholarly tools that have been developed in the West. And the often unremarked upon, although many people are aware of it, considerable overlap between the Islamic understanding of Christian origins and the academic understanding. There's a considerable degree of convergence, which is really worth exploring and making better known. So there will be some tough engagement with texts, biblical texts, and other texts to try and get to have a close understanding of what the issues really are. Most Christians are not aware of the academic understanding of Christianity. It's important to get this information out there so we can have a much more intelligent engagement with our Christian interlocutors, whether they be missionaries or politicians, and so on. So I think it's politically relevant as well as intellectually interesting in our engagement and understanding of the West, its history, and its continuing role in the world, if that makes sense. Just scrolling forward, there's some questions here about the theological questions about David Bentley Hart and about the hereafter, which are not very interesting, but unfortunately we can't really go into that now. I guess more specifically, what's the purpose of studying the Western historical critical method? The purpose is because it is that at the moment, in many parts of the world, the dominant paradigm through which we interrogate our texts, whether it be the Quran, actually, or the Bible, or other texts. There's certain principles and methodologies and philosophical assumptions that are underlie the HCM, the historical critical method, which presents itself as neutral, objective, as disinterested. And many of these assumptions, when you actually look at them, that they are explicitly stated, are far from being neutral or objective. They are philosophically biased. They have a worldview that is implied in this methodology. And it's really important to understand when we look at Western scholars, whether they're talking about Islam or Christianity, why they kind of have certain attitudes, whether it be skepticism, for example, or discounting the supernatural, or having certain attitudes to the origins and development of religions. It's often called Orientalism, this kind of Orientalist mentality. And I think it's really important to understand that, because in understanding this whole mindset, we understand the West better. And as Muslims, we can offer our critical response and alternative to this paradigm, which is vulnerable in many significant ways, I think, to critique. But we need to be aware of these deeper issues and to push back, I think, responsibly and respectfully, but nevertheless critically, to the Western critical method, which they call the historical critical method, as if it was some kind of neutral paradigm, because it's not. It's a product of very specific post-Enlightenment intellectual movements. We'll go into that. It's important, particularly studying Christianity, we understand the HCM, I think. Just scrolling through some more questions. Okay. Where do we register? Will you be sharing the link? Sorry if it already discussed. No, that's fine. If you just go to, if you Google bloggingtheologyacademy.com, if you Google that, bloggingtheologyacademy.com, and you will see a tab there on admissions, also FAQs, also this prospectus is there, and a general overview about the advanced diploma in the Western tradition and Islamic philosophy and theology, and much else besides. So the information, I think, is all there. Just Google, as I say, Blogging Theology Academy. And we're here today just to answer your questions in a live way. We're also going to be producing a video, inshallah, maybe 5-10 minute video where Hassan and I, where we'll just explain, summarize in a summary form, some of the fundamental points about the course and the academy and so on. And that's forthcoming, inshallah. Hassan, do you want to deal with this question? How much reading is involved? And add anything, by the way, please obviously add whatever you want to what I've said.
Thank you. How much reading is involved? There's going to be required reading and there's going to be suggested reading. Now, obviously, those who want to get the most out of the course, the most personal fulfillment out of the course, and more incidentally, the top grades and everything, will just want to read as much as they possibly can. I think it's really important that we cultivate, and there's something that we want to encourage with the course, is cultivate wide reading. And I think it just depends from person to person. I mean, I happen to be someone who, from the age of about 6, I cannot go to sleep without having a pile of books about this big next to my, and I just go through them and then I eventually get to sleep. I've just always been like that. I enjoy it. I just can't live without it. I think Paul is the same, judging certainly by his backdrop, but I do happen to know that anyway. I think it's just really important that you want to read and that you read as widely as you possibly can. Yep. So there will be required reading, which is manageable. I can't say, is it an hour a week or 2 hours a week, but it's not going to be a huge load. I think it will probably be possible to approximately determine that, once we've completely finalized everything to do with the course and you're sent out your course materials, you'll be able to get a very good idea of how many hours you need, but it's going to be something very manageable. In terms of required reading, let's say a couple of hours a week. But I'd like to see you reading with every spare moment that you have, instead of any other as a priority, essentially. And I think you'll see with the course and with the course modules that every course module has its own literature. And the more you go into it, the more time you give, the better.
Okay, cool. And another one, I think, for you, Hassan, because you're very good at explaining these. Do we carry out a test at the end, or how are we graded?
Okay, so the weighting of the course is something that, of course, once you're admitted to the course and you have the student pack and everything is absolutely finalized, I mean, just as with any university, you'll be informed of that in every precise detail. But generally speaking, the most important centerpiece of the course are the 2 pieces of writing, which are fairly lengthy pieces, but not huge, about 5,000 words. Again, that's to be determined 100%, which are related to the one-on-one tutorials that we discussed earlier with Paul and I. Those are going to have the greatest grade weighting in terms of the overall course. There are also assignments which are going to be spread throughout the semesters, and there are going to be quizzes in every single session which are going to be graded on as well. But the weighting is something that is going to be determined fully, obviously, in time for when it's necessary for you to know all those things. But just so that you understand, writing for the tutorials is going to be the main weighting of it. There's not going to be a final examination in the way that you might have had it, for A levels or in some university courses. It's rather going to be spread throughout in terms of spread between quizzes inside the classroom. Participation is going to be a big weighting, because that's very, very important. And then assignments, writing assignments, smaller ones, and then the big one is going to be the essays that you have to write for the tutorial.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, this is a good question. How good do you need to be in English? I presume fluency. I don't know. There's a technical grading, but it is fluency. One would have to be able to read, write, speak, and listen fluently. There are 2 terms, and each term is 26 weeks. 26 weeks is the year, isn't it? So the 2 terms in total, each coming to 26 weeks. That's the academic year. Is there anything in particular we need to prepare for if we are shortlisted for an interview? That's a good question, I think. Hassan?
There's nothing like Cambridge or Oxford. I don't know what they have elsewhere, but where there's going to be a specific test that you're going to have to take in the interview. It's not really anything like that. It's on the basis of what you put in the application form. We're going to be asking questions. So if you haven't applied yet, put in your personal statement things that you wouldn't mind being asked about. And of course, in your personal statement, we want to understand primarily your intellectual pursuits and interests and goals. So it's just a way for us to ascertain, we might ask questions which are designed to elicit an answer which will demonstrate your kind of intellectual ability, your aptitude, the passion that you have for the subject. If we get answers which, of course it's not going to happen, but I'm just saying humorously, which are basically, you don't care much about philosophy and theology and not really an interest of mine, then that's not what we're looking for. So, it's not that you have to already be some sort of great theologian or philosopher, obviously, but we want to see your aptitude and your passion for learning. You may well make mistakes. I wouldn't be terrified of making mistakes in the interview. That's absolutely fine. But we just want to see that you have the right aptitude, the right attitude towards learning, and that kind of thing. It's not a terribly formal interview, so it's not something to worry about. I think it's something that will be quite enjoyable, inshallah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. This is actually quite a good question. What kind of books do we have to read? Will they be very expensive and difficult to get? Many academic books are very difficult to get if you're on a budget or have to buy for a family. Well, yes, many academic books are very expensive. Whether or not you have a family, they are just outrageously expensive, actually. But in terms of my course, a lot of the material will be available online. For example, we're going to be looking at a couple of the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospel, for example. You don't need to purchase that. That's freely available online. Any other texts, sort of set texts that we're looking at closely, I will share, whether it be a PDF or whatever, that I will source that text. But if in terms of wider reading, I mean, if we were talking about, say, on the course and you had an interest in a particular area of history or theology or hermeneutics or whatever, I can suggest books to read, not required, but for further reading. And some they can be sourced. Some of them are accessible easily, and some aren't. So I don't really have an easy answer to that. Some books are expensive, some are not. But hopefully, I'll be able to suggest reading, which is books are available in paperback, widely available, and not expensive, say on like Amazon. But often people find ways around this. I'm not going to go into details now, but there are various kind of sites where you can access academic books, shall we say. This is known. I'm not necessarily encouraging that or not encouraging that. So, but yeah, academic books are expensive. It's a problem, but certainly in terms of the core text that we'll be looking at, that shouldn't be an issue, I think. I'm not expecting people to fork out huge amounts of money. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that, Hassan?
Yeah, for my course, I'm going to be providing a course reader, and that's going to have basically everything that you need for the course. I think Paul may well do the same. So it's basically going to be a PDF, which is going to include readings for every module. As Paul said, there are ways of getting around. I have to say personally, I don't ever have a problem getting any academic book that I want. And you can do that too. I'm not encouraging that, but you can and should, but don't do it.
Something you should, but don't do it. Yeah, it's not paradox.
But I mean, I do have a university account, but I'll be frank, which has everything. But I'll be frank, it's easier. The other methods are easier and quicker, and I tend to just use those. But of course, if people have moral qualms about that, I don't. So even though I'm an author myself, but I do make my books available for sale as physical copies, and I've sold a fair number of them, alhamdulillah. But I always make them available for free as PDFs as well, because I just believe that everyone should have access to knowledge. So yes, I don't think it will be an issue. We will provide everything you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. This one's covering something we mentioned earlier. Are these lives going to be live here on YouTube or on a specific platform? It is fundamentally interesting. Yeah, the course, the talks are live. There's no recorded material at all, but they are on the course. They're not in the public domain, in the sense of non-participants are not going to be accessing it. So you have to really sign up for the course to benefit from the expert tuition. We have half a dozen or more world-class scholars who will be coming in as visiting scholars to give lectures. I mentioned Professor Ali Attai from Zaytuna, for example. He inshallah will be giving two presentations, two sessions, a couple of hours long, which includes question and answer, but that will only be available to people who are on the course. Just to scroll down for some more. Some of these comments are not really relevant to the topic of this live session, so I'm skipping over them, although they're quite interesting in themselves. Did Jesus speak English? That's not something we're going to be. The answer is no. There's a bit of free information for you. Okay, this is debates amongst people about Christianity here, which is a bit off topic. Oh, this is interesting. Is the Institute going to teach logic in the future? Well, not in the future. It's going to teach it now. In Hassan's course, he's an expert in logic, both Islamic classical logic and Western logic. Do you want to say something about that, Hassan, just to amplify a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say more generally, there is a very good, if I say so myself, informational website called bloggingtheologyacademy.com, which has really comprehensive information. So I understand that some of you are not aware of that coming into here, and I'm just suggesting that you do have a close look at that after this session, because it really has everything that you could possibly want to know about it, I think. And it has very comprehensive FAQs, which I think I would very much encourage reading. But in terms of logic, yes, there's a very, very rigorous logic focus. I think that logic, having the tool, having the apparatus of logic to hand as a real, what they call in Arabic a malaka, in Latin the technical word is a habitus. It's a real ability that you have. It becomes a kind of part of your soul, and you can actually use it in everything you do. I think it's an integral part of a traditional conception of a scholar, and I think it's really, really important. And what's special about it is we're acknowledging the contribution of modern logic, which is obviously all that symbolic logic. You will learn all of the symbols, and you'll learn how to manipulate those symbols, and you'll be able to kind of compare it to traditional logic, which will be primarily Arabic logic. It will be in English, of course, although with reference to the Arabic terms, so it will still keep those who do know Arabic on their toes. And just again, it's a greatly empowering tool, and that is the ultimate purpose of this diploma, is to empower.
Lovely. Okay, just scrolling down a bit more. A lot of comments here are to do with people having debates about things. Okay, maybe I probably skipped over things unintentionally. Okay, just to reiterate though, that the start date for the course is Wednesday, the 17th of April this year. Duration is 1 year, which is made up of 2 terms covering a 26-week period. There's information on that under the admissions section on the website. The website is bloggingtheologyacademy.com. It talks about the fees and the application process and the deadline. Application deadline is April the 3rd, Wednesday, April the 3rd, and we recommend you apply early. And it mentions other details about the application process. So do have a look at that under the admissions tab on the website for further information. And of course, there's a place there where you can apply and further information. I think that may be it now. Forgive me if I've overlooked any questions that we were asking. Perhaps you can pop them into the post a comment section now if I've overlooked any question or we've not discussed any issue you wanted us to talk about. Is this a good question? Is this a one-off, or will the course be repeated regularly? Yes, it's going to be periodic every year. That's the intention, inshallah. So this is a beginning of an indefinite course that will be repeated. But we do have other plans. We intend to have, as I mentioned before, real-world events, like retreats, if you like, in different parts of the world. Probably the first would be in Spain, Granada specifically. We have a beautiful venue there we've been offered to use. More details in due course, but also ideally one day maybe in Istanbul or in Far East or in America. We will see, but we certainly intend to have at least once a year, maybe twice if possible, actual physical meetings where we can meet with people and the guest lecturers will be present to continue their work with us. And there are other plans as well, which I won't go into now because we're just focusing on making this a success and beginning the process that begins in April. Just looking here, any more recent questions that have just been added. During the course, if someone goes on holiday, how can they catch up if the lectures won't be recorded? And that's a very good question, actually. I hadn't thought of that. I think we'll have to think about that one. Actually, obviously depends on how long you go on holiday for, doesn't it? You know, if you're going on holiday for a month, that's going to be more serious than going for a week or a weekend. So,
yeah, can I just clarify?
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, it does say this also in the FAQs on the website, but there are, you know, if students have a special situation, circumstances that they want to discuss with us, where they need to have a bit more flexibility, those things can be dealt with, and we have the intention of being flexible, not the intention of being rigid. But in terms of our saying what we mean is that there are no recordings that are going to be automatically available to you. Of course, we'll have the recordings for ourselves, and so those can be in very special circumstances shared if necessary. I mean, one of the circumstances in which they could be shared would be the for purposes of revision on request and so on. But I mean, you know, typically one is not supposed to go on holiday in the middle of a course, but of course, if that's a greater priority for one, and they do feel that they'll be able to catch up ultimately, then sure, we're open to being flexible about providing recordings. But there's going to be a very, very strict restriction on sharing those. And obviously, if they were shared, we'd probably be much less inclined to ever provide them again.
Okay, perhaps the last question, so we've been live now for about an hour. Scholarships and fee reductions are already closed. When can we expect them to open again? Asked Motaz Mala. That's a good question. Hassan, do you want to, have you had an answer to that
one? They're closed because there was huge demand for them, and we don't want everyone to go for that option. I'd do the same if someone was offering me a fee reduction. I'd probably say, yes, I'll take one. Thank you very much. Why not? But we're not a funded institution. We do rely upon student fees to a significant extent. We don't receive funding from any external body, although we have had that kind of option open to us. But one of the great reasons for not wanting to go down that route is independence of various types, particularly intellectual independence. There is a possibility that shortly before the deadline, fee reductions and scholarships might be opened again for a short window at our discretion, but that's something that I'd need to discuss, as so many other things, with Paul. But for now, it's just the fee reductions and scholarships are closed, and so I wish we could offer endless scholarships and fee reductions, but we've already filled all those spaces, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you for that. Perhaps we need to draw this to a close now. So we've been we're going to have an hour, and we've done that. So I did mention earlier that we are going to produce a video, 5-10 minute video, Hassan and I, just summarizing some of the aspects of the academy and the course, to complement the website, the Blogging Authority Academy website, which you can visit, which has a lot of information on it. I do recommend you go there. Also, there's opportunity to ask questions. You can on the website with an email, so you can contact us via the website. Just put in your name and email address and we'll get back to you. So, you know, we are available for further questions. There may, who knows, there may be another Q&A session, live Q&A session. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. So there'll be more output before in the coming days and weeks, video, further interaction with us on the website and so on. So thank you for your patience. Apologies if we've not covered every question that's been asked. I did my best to hopefully get most of them addressed. And And there we go. So do you have any final words, Hassan, before we depart?
I wish you all a very, very blessed Ramadan, inshallah.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. Amen to that. Okay. Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you again soon, inshallah. Take care. Bye-bye.